Hi everyone. In this lesson we will be talking about the difference between the springs and what weight they can handle and the different types of them. So stick with us. The sizes of the springs will be determined by the weight and the height of the door. Springs are the heart of the system. By putting the correct ones on it, you will have a healthy door and a well-operating one. We have two types of springs that we typically use. There's actually three. The first one that I will talk about is going to be a extension spring system, which is the one that we don't use anymore. The second type is going to be the torsion system, which is the most common one for us these days. And the last one is going to be a torque system, which is a Wayne Dalton system, which we don't use. We typically convert. We don't stock those springs on our trucks. So I will suggest converting those springs. So let's go a little bit about history. 40 years ago, every garage door had something that is called an extension spring. An extension spring is a spring that actually stretches. Okay, so think about it. The door needs to go all the way down, and when the door goes all the way down, that spring starts to stretch, and that's what helping us to lift up that door. Because if that door is going to be lifted up only by the operator, it's going to be burned out in one day. So the problem with the extension springs are two problems. One is very dangerous. When that spring stretches so much and it breaks, that spring is going to try to look for a place to fly on because it has so much tension on it. And if the safety cables are not connected well or they're not doing their job, then that spring already killed people. So we need to be very, very careful when we're working on extension springs. The second reason why we don't use the springs anymore is because you have a spring on each side of the door. And that makes the things way more harder to rebalance. You need to put the same amount of tension on the right spring and on the left spring in order to have an equal tension on both sides. If you don't have an equal tension, the door will go up like this, and you don't want that. The only reason why we will have extension springs on today is because we don't have enough headroom for a torsion system. A torsion system usually needs about 9 or above inches or about a foot to fit in the end bearing plates and the shaft which will hold that torsion spring. If you don't have that room, then maybe extension springs is the solution for that problem. Otherwise, don't use that system. Not reliable, very dangerous, and just not going to be well operating. So let's talk about winding up the spring. How do we know how many rounds we need to wind up? So a 7-foot door, we're always going to multiply times 4 plus 2. So for example, a 7-foot door times 4, that equals 28. 28 winds, or 7 full turns. So a 7-foot door will have anywhere between 28 plus 2, which will make it 30. So between 28 and 30 rounds on each spring. So if you have a 1 spring, you're going to put 28 to 30 rounds. If you have 2 springs, you're going to put between 28 and 30 rounds. Now on an 8-foot door, you will do 8 foot times 4, right? And that's going to equal for 32 plus 2, which will be 32 to 34. So that you can wind the spring between 32 and 34 rounds on it. So that will be the right measurement and the right tension on that door. So now I will suggest you guys to memorize this sentence because this is going to help you out understanding a little bit more about the spring. The longer the spring, the weaker it is, meaning that it can carry less weight, but the more lifetime it has. Again, the longer the spring, the weaker it is, the more lifetime it will have. I will explain to you guys why that is in a few. So let's talk about the torsion springs now. What is a torsion spring? A torsion spring is actually, instead of extending like this, the torsion spring is going to be twisting, and that's what's going to give you the force to put on that door. We have sizes of coils that we're going to be talking about on those springs. We're starting from the lowest one, from a 207 all the way for a 262. What is that number? 207, 218, 225, 234, 243, 250, 262. That's actually a 0.207, okay? The size of the coil is so small that you can't even measure it out. And we're going to show you guys how to measure up the springs so you will know exactly what size of coil if you don't have that written on that spring. So let's go a little bit about the colors of the springs, and I will suggest you guys to memorize this part. If you guys memorize this part, you will save yourself a lot of work on the field, because you will know exactly what spring goes to what door, and you will have a very high accuracy rate doing that. So we will start from the smallest spring, which will be a 207. Again, reminding you guys, a 207 is the size of the coil, meaning that the coil is the smallest one. The 207 will be colored by yellow. That's the mark that we have. We have for every spring size, we have a mark of a color to help you guys analyze what spring it is if you guys do not find the written size marked on the spring. The 207 is going to be marked by yellow and will be between 21 to 23 inches, meaning that that's the springs that we carry on are typically going to be between 21 inch long to 23 inches. That spring will normally go on a single layer door. The reason why I'm saying normally or typically in this video is because this is not rocket science. This is not 100% correct. There can be a door that is a single layer door that will have a higher spring. Why? I'm going to explain that on the video as well. The next spring is going to be a 218 marked by white, anywhere between 24 and 26. This will typically carry up a double layer door, a vinyl back. The next spring above that will be a 225 marked by red, anywhere between 24 and 26 inches long. Typically will be a double layer or a triple layer door. Then the next one is going to be our 234, which is a very strong spring, which will be colored by brown. Will be between 21 and 31 inches long. Typically will carry on a triple layer, very light triple layer, okay, or a wooden door. Very light wooden door. The next one above it will be a 243, which will be marked by green, anywhere from 29 to 31 inches as well, which will typically be a triple layer or a wooden door. The difference between the steel doors, it can be 1 inch and 3/8 steel or a 2-inch door. That's going to determine whether it's going to be a 225, a 234, or a 243. Remember, the bigger, the thicker the door, the more heavier it is. The next spring is going to be a 250. That's our Golden Boy. That's almost the strongest spring that we have as far as the residential ones. And that's going to be between 29 and 31. That's a very strong spring, guys. This will usually carry up a steel door that is a 4-layer, or a wooden door, or like a custom door that has a lot of struts on it. It's a very heavy and strong spring. The last spring that we have on residential size, it's already considered commercial, is going to be a 262. Will be marked by blue. And the typical length is going to be between 34 and 36. Those are always wooden doors or a 4-layer door, special orders, very strong springs, and very, very heavy. So, like I told you guys, typically, why typically? Because we have things that are increasing the size of the spring on a door and will add weight to it. The first thing that will add weight for a door is going to be a strut. You put a strut on, you're adding weight for the door. You're adding weight for the door, you need to change the size of the springs. About every 3 to 4 struts that you add on a door, that's going to take you to the next step above it. Meaning that if you had a door which is a single layer with a 207 on it, and you've added 4 struts on that door, now that door needs a 218. The next thing that will add weight to the door will be windows. Okay? And of course an overlay or an installation will add weight for the door. Now I want to talk with you guys about a question that I have for you guys that I want you to ask yourself. You guys came into a garage door and you saw a rusted and old spring. Is that a good sign or a bad sign? So after you guys answered yourself that question, I will tell you it's a good sign. Why? A rusted and old spring means that it's the right spring because it's sitting there for 20 years or 15 years or whatever that is. So you should stick with that spring. Meaning if you came to a house and the spring is very old, take the spring, measure it out, and put the same exact spring or something very equivalent to that spring. So that spring will work you for another 20 to 15 or 20 years. You came into a house and there was a good shape of a spring. That spring looks almost new, or she told you, yes, I replaced it 2 years ago. Guys, it's a bad sign. It indicates that that spring might not be the corrected one and it broke before the time. So you should doubt that spring, and that's when you're supposed to go to what we wrote down above, which is what springs typically goes to what type of door.